first question then. When would you use a stiff rig?
Not a very nice question for me because I don't use stiff links very often. I do use combi links a lot. It's a strange one. There's so many people do well with stiff links and they don't seem to work so well for me. Not knocking the use at all because people have some incredible catches on them. But I do use a stiff section on most of my hook links in combi links. The times I avoid the combi link is when fishing in very soft silt and when fishing over siltweed and such like, because of the unnatural angles you can end up with a hook link laying in.
So what's the actual theory behind the stiff rig itself?
The idea behind it, the biggest one, it cuts tangles right down, but the theory behind it with the fish picking the baits up, the sheer fact that it is stiff, the bait goes in with the hook and the line. As the fish tries to eject the bait, the line doesn't bend like a soft braided link, so the hook doesn't follow it out. It's a big problem for a carp to eject a stiff link once it's accepted in the first place.
Right, but when wouldn't you use them then again?
Again, over siltweed or in silt, you can get the situation where the lead may be buried a little bit in the weed and you can end up with the line just pointing straight up, just totally unnatural angles.
And when would you actually use braid then?
Braid I'm happy to use anywhere at any time. Braid allows the bait to behave much more naturally, much softer in the water. A lot of braids, once they soak water up, become much softer feeling anyway, a lot more supple anyway than they do in the dry state. The drawbacks to braid, with it being so soft, they do create a few more tangles. Obviously as you cast out, the lead's going out first and the braids can wrap around the tubing. The biggest drawback to braid is tangles. You can get around it using stringers, cuts tangles down a little bit. PVA bags will cut tangles down a little bit. Also shorter range casting where you can watch it going out there. But there isn't really a situation when I wouldn't want to use a braided hook link. As I said before, I tend to use a little bit of a combination of the two. I use a stiff part to cut down on the tangles and a soft braided part just to allow the bait to react a little bit more naturally.
Do you think the braid has anything to do with mouth damage on fish, and if so, how can we actually avoid that?
Certainly some of the finer diameter braids could create mouth damage, as could nylon. These days it's very rare I use braids anything less than about 20 pound breaking strain for hook links. I find at that strain you play the fish heavy if you need to, and you don't get the cutting effect which you could be possible with the fine 8, 10, 12 pound braids. Depends on the type you're choosing. As technology moves on, we're able to make finer and finer diameter materials, and I personally think it's not a step in the right direction on that one.
When you're playing a fish, is there a way to play it that perhaps damages the mouth less, or is there nothing you can do about mouth damage, that type of thing?
Obviously, not playing them over the top, not playing them really, really heavy. There's only one thing going to give if you're giving the fish a lot of stick, that's flesh. I just play the fish steady. It's a difficult one because play them too long you can get a big build-up of lactic body acids and such like, which isn't good for them either, but just playing them sensibly. I try and avoid, when the fish is on the surface, the lead banging about in the air. That's the cause of a lot of hook pulls. Suddenly, whilst they're in the water, the lead's cushioned in water. Once they're on the surface, the lead's in the air, there's a lot of force then on the hook. So the only things I'd possibly do a little bit different, that's probably when a lot of mouth damage gets made as well. Once the fish's on the surface, if lead's out, I keep the rod low right until the last minute when I've got to net it. But I just try and avoid that lead banging about. Ideally, I like the lead to come off during the fight, but it doesn't always happen.
You mentioned the combi rig, and what sort of situations would you use that in specifically?
It's the rig I use almost all of the time, apart from, as I said earlier, with softweed and silt. I just like combi rigs, the sheer fact that I know the bait's presented right, I'm not going to wind in with a big tangle on there. I know the bait's behaving relatively naturally when the fish is inspecting it. I just like the whole concept of the combi rig.